Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webcast. My name is Mike Otranto, and I'm a strategic account specialist at Microsoft. I'm also joined on today's webcast with Jim Patterson, who leads in a business development role, and Matt Wiley, product guru and technology expert. Today, we're going to focus on resource capacity and demand with Project Online resource engagements. After the webinar, you will receive an email with a copy of the recording and the slide deck so you can review. The line will not be open for questions, but you can type in your questions via the chat feature. So, if you want to know more about Microsoft and who we are today, we are a Microsoft joint venture that was founded in 2002. We provide consulting, business process outsourcing, managed services, and global support for staffing. We are a triple gold certified Microsoft partner. Less than 1% of partners ever have that designation. We are certified in project and portfolio management, collaboration and content, and cloud productivity. From a project and portfolio management standpoint, we have a deep expertise in Project Online and Project Server. So we have a lot of experience helping organizations maximize their efficiency and technological advantage. We have a footprint all over North America and internationally. I will now hand off the webcast to Jim Patterson. Jim?
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate the introduction. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this webcast today. And let's get into the topic areas of resource capacity and demand with Project Online resource engagements. The agenda we're going to follow today is talk a little bit about resource management concepts that are addressed by the functionality that we're going to be addressing. Then we'll talk specifically about the concepts of resource engagements in Project Online and what they are and what they're intended to do. And we'll spend the bulk of our time in demonstration showing you it happening live within the software, and Matt Wiley will be doing the demonstration for that. We'll then have some summary and some wrap up and some potential next steps that you can take if there's things of interest here for you today. With that, let's move forward. So in the area of resource management concepts, it's a challenge area for a lot of organizations, and it seems to be a holy grail for folks to try and get the optimum resource management approaches for their particular organizations. But what is resource management overall? Well, if you look at a generic Wikipedia type of definition, it really is resource management as being the efficient and effective deployment and allocation of an organization's resource when and where they are needed. That's fairly general in its approach. But if we do it to a degree that furthers beyond what we're doing today in an organization, some of the benefits that we can get is better resource visibility to understand where our people are and do we have the capability to deliver with the resources we do have. Increase in business value, meaning that if we get the right people on the right things with the right availability and focus, we have the ability to deliver the more high value projects and initiatives and efforts within our organization. We can also save time and money by making sure we have the right, most skilled and most effective and most targeted resources on the work so that we can get them done quickly and with higher quality. Also, if we do those things, we'll increase project success rates, meaning having the right resources at the right time on projects will help us deliver those things on time and on budget and with better quality on a more consistent basis. Also, just to be able to accommodate demand. If we do resource management and have the visibility that we need, we can actually look at the requests that come into the organization and better, let's just say, optimize the use of our resources across the demand that we have. Most organizations can't possibly do everything that's requested of them. So being able to look at what we have on our plate, what resources we have at our disposal, and then be able to prioritize the things that we should be working on give us the ability to accommodate demand in a more effective basis and a better return to the organization. And also resource management helps us at the employee level. Oftentimes without good resource management in place, employees get inadvertently over-allocated and sometimes very severely. This can lead to long hours, burnout, and often high turnover in organizations that don't get a handle on this to some degree. So these are some of the areas that resource management is meant to address. Now, from a resource management perspective, not all organizations are created equally. And the ability and the granularity at which they're able to tackle resource management can depend on the overall culture, maturity, and readiness of the organization. What we're going to be talking about today here is really that first one, and we find it's the easiest method of resource management that organizations can tackle as a starting step, even if they want to get further along in the process. Capacity planning is really higher level resource management, meaning understanding in general what type of resources we need and for how long and to what, let's just say, percentage or allocation of their effort, and understanding who we can actually put on projects and to what degree. Can we have a developer on here for 50% of their time on a project, for example, over, say, a 2-month period? That's a capacity planning level of detail. And then by being able to allocate those resources to projects and saying, yes, Mr. Project Manager or Ms. Project Manager, you can have that resource, being able to allocate them to specific tasks of work and then be able to do resource tracking against what they're actually working and how they're performing on those tasks are another level of granularity, detail, and maturity if you're trying to do that across the board for an organization. Then ultimately getting team management and getting more effective as resource teams, and work management, meaning to effectively accommodate all types of work within the organization, not just projects into that mix, is a level of maturity in that step process that we might be looking to aspire to. If we look at what the Gartner Group says, resource management by maturity really does and should take a crawl, walk, run type of approach. And if you look here, this chart really starts with maturity level 2 as far as a level where maybe resource management begins. And if you look at the color-coded boxes to the left of the chart, resource capacity planning is at the top. And notice that we can tackle more of that early in the maturity stage, doing that high-level project roles and staffing, maybe prioritizing projects and programs and understanding what resources we want to apply to that. Notice the detailed resource allocation in the green starts later and begins in maturity level 3 as we go on through, once we kind of master and get a stability point on resource capacity planning. The idea here is that we need to understand where we're at in that maturity process and what we're ready to sustain as an organization when we look at the approach that we take. So some of the dimensions of resource management maturity that we might look at, as I had mentioned, is the planning and tracking granularity. Are we doing this at a high level? Are we doing it at a detailed task level? Are we looking at just assigning roles or named individual resources to our projects? Are we looking at approvals and negotiations between functional managers and project managers to understand what we can use from the functional organizations in highly matrixed organizations? Also, is there governance and prioritization so that when we do assign people work, do they understand what the highest priorities are and what they should tackle first if they're assigned to multiple things, which is often the case? Also, forecasting versus actuals. You know, we plan where we think we're going to spend our resources, and then the reality is of how we actually execute and what we're actually doing based upon the actual project execution on the ground. And oftentimes there's a divergence there that we need to track and understand the difference between what we forecasted and what we're actually performing against. And then there's the whole cost side of things. Do we track resource costs and want to understand what the costs of those are, not just from a roll-up perspective and seeing what we're burning as far as dollars in a project, but maybe understanding getting the right resources with the right skills at the right price on a particular project in cost-sensitive projects, for example, in client-facing projects where we want to do something on a profitable basis. So these are all dimensions that come into the resource planning and resource capacity and demand process when you factor in the maturity dimension. So resource management we really do need to be honest with ourselves, and we need to assess readiness. What is our organization ready to absorb? What can we tackle? How can we improve and stretch the organization a little bit, but not break the organization or set ourselves up for less than ideal success moving forward? So really assessing what it is that we're actually ready to do. So by doing that, we need to understand the organizational maturity and also understand the environment and the culture. We may have project management maturity, which is really a technical thing about how we understand and what we're able to deliver on from a process and method perspective, but also environment and culture. What is the culture ready to absorb? Is our culture one to adopt change, and if so, how fast? Is there an ability to get the information that we're looking to get to the way the culture and the environment is now, or is it something we should put into a later stage roadmap? And that leads into that build a resource management roadmap. Just because we start at maybe a modest stretching of the organization today doesn't mean we can't be ambitious in where we want to take the organization overall on a resource management journey. And then the other key is define your process first. Very difficult to model in a solution something that doesn't exist, or modeling vapor. Have a process in place and a process in mind on how you'd like the resource flow of both information and the allocation and the execution of resources, and those things can be then automated better, or automated on an assist basis within a PPM or resource management solution. So with that, let's take a look at resource engagements in Project Online. Microsoft's PPM solution, Project Online, really is designed to be an end-to-end project and portfolio management solution, all the way from the early idea of a potential project, all the way through the portfolio management and selection of projects, and then all of the things you might want to do on the execution of projects. And notice that I have highlighted in red here the demand management and the resource management components. That's really where the resource engagements come in, where you have demand for projects and work. We have to understand what it's going to take from a resource perspective. And long before we have maybe detailed planning information, we have to have an understanding of what resources are required, and do we have the resources to even fulfill on this if we want to actually execute on this project. These dimensions are in Project Online as standard capabilities. Project Online really allows you to do this fairly simply in the fact that it's a cloud-based SaaS offering, meaning that Microsoft provides all the infrastructure, high SLAs of uptime, and compliance with any standards that you might have for security. And then it also leverages it in the context of an Office 365 platform, meaning if you're an organization that's going that route and using Microsoft or other business productivity tools, this resource capacity planning and demand management can be done in the context of a project management process, but become part of the actual overall Office 365 experience for you folks that are Microsoft shops already. So what are resource engagements? Let's define that. So resource engagements really is a capability in Microsoft Project Online to facilitate capacity planning. Meaning, if you look at my first bullet here on perform higher level capacity planning in Project Online, folks that have come up using Microsoft Project on the desktop know about detailed project management or allocation or assignments level of resource allocation, meaning you build a schedule to whatever level of detail makes sense for you. You then assign resources to those detailed tasks, and then your resource level of efforts roll up through that work breakdown structure in order to give you a more detailed based resource planning. Now that requires planning detail. In a lot of cases, to have it come out accurately requires a little bit of planning maturity in organizations. And most organizations have people in pockets that do that really well, but the challenge is trying to do that well across the board, where the resource engagement capability really allows you to do resource capacity planning, but tasks and schedules don't have to exist yet. They're not a prerequisite for doing this type of planning. Essentially what you do is you allocate a percentage of effort or hours of work over a time period for either a generic or a name specific resource. And by putting that information in, it does twofold. It kind of says, this is what my requirement is, and it also can serve as a resource request from the project organization or the project manager over to the functional organization and or resource manager. If you look at the dialog box, and we'll see this more of this in the demonstration today, notice that the information that's required for an engagement is a resource type. In this case, it's showing a generic software engineer, but it could be a named individual just as well if you wanted to target a specific person. A description of what it is you want them to do on this particular project. And then really, instead of having detailed tasks, just saying how long I need them for this effort or for this engagement. Is it for a month? Is it for 2 weeks? Is it for 3 months? And then allocate that resource by a percentage of their effort. In this case, it's showing 100%. Or you could also do it by saying I need 100 hours over that month, or etc. But very high level planning. And also you can have some comments and narrative in the engagement to specify any specific unique requirements or things that'll be needed from that resource as you go on through. And Matthew will show you a lot more of this as we go on through the demonstration. So in the resource engagement process, typically you set up a resource pool and you set up parameters to determine whether or not resources will require engagements. So it can either be a mandatory thing that's put in place or something that's a little bit more elective. The project managers are the ones that then typically create or modify a resource engagement or request, meaning that dialogue I showed you in the prior slide would typically be filled out by a project manager saying, this is what I need on my project. And that request would get funneled to the appropriate resource manager. And then the resource manager would then review and analyze the request or the series of requests that come into them for demand on their functional area, and then respond to the project manager. This manifests itself in the resource manager saying, this is who you could have, for example. And it basically says, this is accepted, this goes to the project manager, says, this is who you could have for this project. And at a high level says, okay, you can have this person for this project to whatever degree that you requested in the engagement. Then that project manager is free to then assign that resource to individual tasks or work items within that detailed project schedule. It could be something that the resource manager counters and makes a counter proposal and edits that and accepts it. And then the project manager can decide if under those changed terms that they will still accept that resource engagement based upon that modified set of assumptions. And once again, if that's a yes, then the project manager is free to assign that resource. Ultimately, if no, you can go back to the process and the project manager can modify a new resource engagement or request, and the process can start again if it's rejected at any given point in time. The idea is this is very key in initiating projects and resourcing and building a team for a project, but it's also something that can be ongoing as the needs change and as a project evolves and the resource needs or assumptions change moving forward. Now, what's diagrammed here is a pretty standard approach to the way resource engagements are used within Project Online, but it doesn't need to be a one-size-fits-all. I'll just throw up here just a variation of the theme that one of our clients is doing, where the project manager may develop a schedule and then use generic resources for resource planning without knowing who they're going to get yet. And then the resource manager and the project manager can actually do some collaboration and discussion, right, and negotiate agreements for project resources potentially outside the tool. And then ultimately, when the resource manager commits a named resource to that project, the project manager can then once again allocate the named resources to the detailed tasks and use the replacement feature in project to change the generics to that specific named individual resource that they've been given for that particular project. The key is it addresses different levels of collaboration between project managers and resource managers, depending a little less on the system on the negotiation process and more on face-to-face, where some cultures are more comfortable with that. It allows resource managers to commit resources directly to projects at a generic level, and it removes the surprise factors for the resource managers when their resources are just assigned without their involvement. So either way, the involvement in negotiation of resource engagements provides better collaboration and better, just say, awareness on both sides of that matrix. So if you look at the roles of project manager and resource manager, the resource engagements, the project manager would determine the resource requirements for the project. The project manager and the resource manager would then analyze and negotiate for those resources. The resource manager would commit resources to the project using the resource engagements feature in Project Online. The project manager would then review engagements committed by the resource manager to make sure that all looks good. And then they're free to assign and replace resources on tasks in their very detailed project plan that they've built out. Now, outside of that ongoing, project managers may ongoingly request changes to the engagements as needed to meet the needs of their project. And this could be things to provide, say, an alternate resource if somebody's not working out or somebody leaves. For increased allocation, meaning I really need more time from this person in order to deliver. Extending the date, saying, okay, this is the allocation I needed. I still need them at 50%, but can I have them for another week or two? Also, early release. If we do better than we thought, they can send back and saying this resource is no longer needed and free it up for other engagements that the resource manager might get for that resource type. And then the resource manager can then review and respond to these requests for changes to the engagements. The idea is it's really meant beyond what people are used to doing in Microsoft Project on the desktop, a standalone project plans is really do this on a collaborative and holistic basis across all resources and all work within the solution. So when we go to the demonstration, what we're going to really talk about today is the components and the steps that we take, how we set up resources in Project Online for engagements, the fact that you can set up alerts and reminders and what that looks like, engagement requirements and how to get those actually created, submitting the engagement requests, how the engagement requests are viewed and processed, and then look at resource engagement commitments and how they're made. And then ultimately, we're going to show some resource views, reports, and dashboards to help you visualize all what's going on within the solution. And with that, I will turn it over to Matt Willey for a demonstration to show this live.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Jim. All right, so I'm logged into Project Online. Project Online is part of the Office 365 platform as a whole, so it's just one of the different apps, and it works really well with a lot of the other ones in multiple different ways, and we'll actually show how it works with Power BI, one of the other apps in Office 365 today. And so what I'm looking at here is a list of all the different projects that I have going on. And we can see these projects are in different states, from requested to approved to in progress, so on and so forth. And I can see the status of these different projects. So I can see the overall health, schedule health, work health, resource health, cost health issues, and such. I also have a high-level timeline or Gantt roadmap type of a view of where these projects lay out over time. And so the very first step in this process is we have some requested projects, things that we want to do, and we need to better understand the scope from a resource perspective, as well as other perspectives like budget, for example. But I need to better understand the scope from a resource perspective, which is what we're focusing on here today. So to do that, I could select my project. And there are multiple ways to go and build out your resource plan, but I'm going to show it here in Microsoft Project, so I can open it up in Microsoft Project for editing. There are ways to do it through the web as well, but this is my preferred method. And so I can come in and I can build my team of resources. Generally at this point, I would start out with just generic resources because I don't yet know that, Jim Patterson or Matthew Willey are going to be working on this project. I just know I need a business analyst or a developer or, the different types of roles and or skill sets that I need for this particular project, right? And so I could come in and let's say I need a business analyst. I'm going to create what's called an engagement, as Jim was talking about in the previous slides. And so when I create my new engagement, which is really this placeholder for this resource on my project or resources, that will later on become a request once the project's been approved, that a resource manager can then go and fulfill and say, here you go, here's your business analyst, here's Matthew Willey, that kind of a thing. I have to fill out a little bit of information. So I can fill out a description if I choose to do so. So I can say I need him to gather requirements. And I think I'm going to need this business analyst starting in, let's say, October. And I think I will need them for the next few months till, let's say, February, something like that. I can then come in and say, I think I need this business analyst 100% of the time, or 50%, just part-time, or I need 3 of them. I need 300% of business analysts, basically 3 FTEs. You can also do it in hours. So I can go, I think I need about 200 hours of a business analyst time spread out, over these few months here. I like to do it in percents just because then it calculates the hours for you, and you can actually jump back and forth at any time between hours and percents. And it knows, how many working days there are in the month, and it counts for holidays and all that. So if you just do it in percents, it'll figure out all the hours for you a little bit nicer, and you can go mess with that later on if you choose to do so. I can then put in any comments of any specifics or details around this request. Say okay, and now it shows up very much like an Excel spreadsheet type of a format. So you can see over here from October through February, I'm asking for this person 100% of the time, this business analyst. But I can then come in and change that and go, actually in October, we'll just be ramping up. I think I only need you 50%. And in February, we'll be closing out the project, maybe only 75%. And you can copy and paste and drag and drop and things that you might be used to doing in, say, Excel. So it makes it super simple and easy to come in, create this high-level resource plan without having to create a detailed project schedule that has 100, 1,000, whatever amount of detailed tasks in it. so that we can better get an idea of the amount of resources we're going to need for this project, the scope, as well as the types of resources we're going to need, so we make sure that we can staff these projects accordingly within the periods of time where we're looking to do them, right? So from there, I can save that, submit that, that goes back into Project Online. And then a lot of people are at that point going to go through an approval process of some sort. And you may even use the portfolio analysis capability within Project Online to do some what-if scenarios around these resource plans. And I'll briefly show that here just so you can kind of see how that would work, and this can interact with this resource engagement process. So within the portfolio analysis model, you can come in, you can start out with a cost analysis, making sure we're going to stick within our budget and figure out, you know, which projects are going to give me the most value for the amount of dollars or investment that I have. And then the next step of that process is then looking at it from a resource perspective. Just because we have the dollars to do these projects doesn't necessarily mean we have the resources, and that could be people, equipment, materials, you know, all of the above, different types of resources. So when I get in here, I can automatically, I see that I have problems from a resourcing perspective because it's only selecting some of the projects. It's not selecting all of them. And what that means is it's saying that if you're going to put your resources on the projects that are going to give us the most value back to our business, it's trying to optimize the portfolio for me and say, I should do these ones. But we can start to play with this and do some what-if scenarios to figure out how we're going to get all of this other work done, especially if it, you know, needs to be done and we have the dollars to do so, right? And so what you can see here over on the right is there's a high-level timeline of where all these projects lay out if we do them when people are asking them to be done. And one thing that we can do is we can take some of these lower priority or lower value projects, and I could push this out, say 3 months, 6 months, and go, what if we stagger these things a little bit better? I hit recalculate, and that's going to pop in some more of these projects into the selected area here, because now we're not trying to do all the projects at the same time, right? We're not stressing out our resources by saying you have to do all these projects at the same time. We're pushing some out. The other thing we can do is say, what if we hire, say, 6 resources? We're willing to increase headcount and or use some contractors for a period of time to get this work done. And so I can hit recalculate, and notice it moved in some more projects here. It actually moved in 3 projects. And I can see now we can get 72% of the value. So we can play with this and create some scenarios and go, scenario A, we need to hire this many people. Scenario B, we need to move out these projects. Scenario C is maybe a mixture of them. And we can start to make some decisions from kind of a top-down portfolio management perspective of how we're going to go and actually get this work done and make sure that by the time we get there to when these projects are supposed to start, we've hired the proper resources and or already figured it out instead of trying to figure it out on that day or, you know, shortly before. So from there, then, certain projects get approved and they move on to the next stage in that process. And the portfolio analysis module is not required by any means, but it's a capability that's there if you want it. There are other ways to do approvals where we send out notifications and send approvals to a group of people, and they can review the business case and so on and so forth and approve and get to it that way as well. From there, then, once the project's approved, a resource manager gets notified, and let's say I'm the resource manager for all the business analysts or a certain team of resources or whatever it might be. I can then come in as a resource manager, and I'm now looking at our enterprise resource pool, and I can see all of the different resources in here that I have access to anyway. And I've selected all of my business analysts here, and I can then come in after I've been notified via email, and I can come in and look at these different requests and then work on fulfilling them and say, you know, here you go, here's what I can give you. So in this view, I can see all of the resource requests I've already committed, the ones I've already fulfilled and said, here you go, here's your resource. If I ever need to make changes to any of those, I can just by coming back into here, but I can also collapse that up, and then I can just look at all of my proposed resources down below. So these are all the ones that I have not yet fulfilled yet. And you can see here, here's that request for a business analyst to gather requirements 100% of the time from this date to that date, you know, so on and so forth. And I can get more details. You have it broken down in hours, and there's lots of different ways you can look at this to get the information. But basically, I now understand what this request is for, and I need to staff it. So I can flip over to my capacity planning view here, or there are lots of other different reports and views that I can look at. I particularly like this one just because it's quick and easy to look at, see what I need to see. And if someone is in red in a particular period of time, like Amy here, then that means they're already over allocated. So we probably want to stay away from Amy. We might even look at getting her some help, especially up front here. She has a ton of work going on. If they are in green, then that means they're being utilized properly. So they're not too far over or under allocated. And if they're in blue, that means they have availability. And I can see Patrick here doesn't have any work going on. Keep in mind that this isn't just necessarily looking at project work, but we can also create high-level resource plans for more operational work and say that, Lisa is a certain percentage allocated to the partner help desk, more operational, keep the lights on types of things as well. So we're really trying to get a full picture of all the different types of work. And it counts for holidays and the amount of, hours in the month and, so on and so forth, and people's different schedules if they're in different locations. So there's really a lot on the back end of that helps us get a clear picture of, who really has availability. So from there I go, okay, Patrick has availability, he needs to get some work. And remember, we're looking out into the future here. This is capacity and demand out in the future for this part, right? So it's not like he's just sitting around doing nothing necessarily right now. Just in the future, we haven't gave him anything to work on yet. So I can come in, I go to my business analyst request here, and I can pull the drop down and switch that to Patrick. That will notify the project manager, and then they will be able to start using that resource on their project, within their project schedule. So kind of going down the line here, switching back to more the project manager side of things, I could use either project desktop to come in then into my project schedule, and I'm notified in there, and there's a quick find and replace option to switch out these generic resources with the new resource you got. You can just say everywhere where business analyst is, switch it out with Patrick, and it'll just go boop. And if, excuse me, if you happen to try to utilize a resource on a task that you don't have an engagement for, then it shows this little icon over here on the side, and it's basically saying that, hey, you're trying to use, let's say business analysts or Patrick on this particular task once I get to that step, and you don't have an engagement that's been approved by a resource manager for you to use them within that time period or for that amount of time, that percentage of their time, right? And so there is a linkage here then between the project schedule side and between, what was put into that initial resource plan, so we can make sure we don't exceed what was in that resource plan. If we do, then there's a little wizard here I can run through here that will help me update my resource plan so that it fits within this, and then a resource manager can approve that, and we can kind of keep iterating as that makes sense. Also, right from within Project Online, there's an online planner that I can utilize to manage my project schedule and go at that as well. And so that's kind of the next step of this, right? Then getting more detailed schedules and such now that I have the resources given to me. And then lastly, people can come into the timesheet and they can put in time, which is all part of this resource management process, and put in their time on those different tasks and projects they've been working on. And then through this whole process, we have many different reports that we can utilize to get visibility into what's going on and compare our initial resource plan to our project schedule and make sure that we're not really far off, and then compare it to where the time is actually going in the timesheets, your actual hours and so on and so forth, and really get visibility into that whole process. So let's take a look at that. So I just popped open Power BI. Power BI is another app that's part of Office 365. However, you don't have to have Office 365 as a whole to use either Project Online or Power BI. You can license those individually if you need to do so. And what Power BI allows me to do is create some really robust interactive reports and dashboards. And today we're just going to focus on the resource management ones, but we have full report packs for project status, portfolio status, timesheets, demand and requests coming in, so on and so forth. Lots of different reports for kind of all the different things that people generally ask us for, is what it comes down to. So what I'm looking at here is all of the, a high-level overview of what's going on from a resource perspective right now. You can see I have 10 pending resource requests. So resource managers have yet to go in there and do the process that I just showed you and go fulfill those resource requests and say, here you go, here's your resources. If that number is getting really high, then that's something for us to worry about, because people aren't getting the resources they need in a timely manner. I can also see things like the top allocated resources over here on the right. Grace Williams is our highest allocated resource, 290% allocation. We're asking her to do the work of about 3 people. And so that's obviously a problem. We need to get her some help. So we're really trying to call attention to problems here and be able to understand how we're doing and where we're at. From there, I can utilize the filters over here on the side of the screen to come in and just look at the resources or resource that I want to look at. So I can group this or filter this down by position role. So I can see here, I just want to look at those business analysts that we were talking about earlier, or my business analysts and my developers. And so really quickly, I can come and filter that down, just look at what I want, or by department, or I can even get down to a specific resource. I want to come in and just look at, Adam Barr, see how Adam Barr is doing. So once you filter this down and you're looking at the resource or resources that you want to look at, you can utilize the different tabs across the bottom to get visibility into all the different aspects of resource management. The first aspect here is resource utilization. We want to make sure we're utilizing our resources properly, but not overly trying to utilize them, so that we're getting the most value we can out of our resources without trying to overwork them, which will eventually then put our projects at risk of going over budget and over schedule and having delays and so on and so forth. So across the top, this line here represents the capacity of all of the resources I've selected, how much work they can do with in any particular period of time. Notice it goes up and it goes down, and that's because each month has a different amount of working days in it and has holidays, and people take vacations, and we hire resources at certain points in time, and resources are leaving us at other points in time, and so it's really taking into account all of that. Then as we assign work to people, that builds up this bar here, and each color represents a person. We're kind of looking at a lot of people here right now, but that's going to build up. If this bar goes over that line, then we know we've over allocated our resources as a group. Even though individual people might be over or under, as a team, we're trying to put too much work on this whole team of resources, this group of resources. If it's the opposite, like what we see here, then we're not utilizing our resources properly. We're not staffing them on enough work, and there's more value we could be getting out of them that we're not, right? And then I have the details of all that down here below, and people that are over allocated show up in the red. I really like this tab as well. This one is showing resource availability, and it's grouped here by role, so I can see how available or not each of my different roles are. If we're having struggles in the development area or business analyst or whatever it might be. From there, though, you can actually drill in, and many of these reports that I'm showing here today are drill-in capable. And so I can come and click on, say, my support role, drill in, and then it shows me all of my support people and how available or not each one of them are. So you can start to drill in and drill out and see things at a different level of detail if you choose to do so. This particular report is really helpful for understanding how we're doing from a planning perspective through this whole process, from our initial plan into our more detailed project schedule, and then into where the time is actually going from an actual hours or timesheet type perspective. And so this red line here, let's look at Q2, is showing me that in my initial resource plans, right, when we built these resource plans here up front over in, say, Project Online, like I showed, high-level resource plans, we initially estimated in Q2 there was going to be about 14,000 hours of work is what this is telling me across, the resources that I'm looking at, and I could come and filter this down for different groups and such, remember, right? Then we went and we built our project schedules, and that went up to about 44,000 hours. That's more than twice as much. So that tells me that when we do our initial resource plans, we are underestimating big time, or when we do our project schedules, we're overestimating big time. And so we can start to look into that and figure out why we're so far off, and then try to adjust people's behaviors so that we can plan better in the future and be more predictable. At the end of all of that, then this black bar here shows me the timesheet hours that are rolling up, and there was actually only about 7,000 hours of timesheet hours. And this is my demo data here, so it's not super realistic, but we can see that there's a big mismatch and things are way off, and we can start to get better visibility into that whole process all the way through, and try to then correct the behavior and train people and say, in the future, all of your initial resource plans, double them. And by the way, you can templatize these resource plans and your project schedules and such. Maybe we need to go into the resource plans and double them to start with, so when you get in there, you have a better place to start from. So we can start to do those things, make tweaks and adjustments, and over time, we should get more predictable and better at this whole process. The next two tabs are very similar, so I'll just show this one here. One is looking at your initial resource plan, the other one's looking at your project schedules. But really what it's trying to do is it's trying to show me where are we planning to spend all of our time. And you can see here, we're planning to spend most of our time on cutting costs on this particular portfolio of projects. We're not looking to spend much time at all improving customer retention as a comparison. What if as a business, though, we've said improving customer retention is our highest priority? We're not so interested in cutting costs right now. Maybe we're already doing well in that area. We have good cost controls in place. Then we can tell that we're out of whack here. We're not putting our time into the right things and our resources and our investments into the right things to achieve our business goals. From there, I can even drill into these. I can come and go click on my cut cost portfolio and see then which projects are within that portfolio. Looks like we're spending a lot of time or planning to spend a lot of time upgrading our hub. If that's not important, we can cancel that. We can start to cut that down and take those resources and utilize them on other things that can get us better alignment with what our business goals are, right? And so lots of different ways we can look at this, and this is just a base report pack we can start from, and there are some others as well. But you can start to see how within Project Online, as you're going through this whole resource management process, we can get really good visibility into what's going on. We can then subscribe to these reports, and I want to get an email every day, or I want to get an email if a certain threshold is built. I can set up notifications, what they call data alerts. You know, if anyone goes into the red, I want to get a notification if it's one of my resources, you know, those types of things. I can also do some ad hoc reporting. So let's say I've been asked to pull up some specific information, you know, in an ad hoc perspective, and I don't want to have to submit a request to IT. And let's say I'm not the most technical user, I'm not, you know, writing queries or anything like that. There's a feature within Power BI that lets me do what's called natural language query. All that means is I can ask a question, and based off of the question I type in, it will actually find or create a report for me that gives me what I want. So from a resource management perspective, I could do something like I want to show average. And notice as I'm doing this, it kind of helps me out and it's giving me options of what I might want to do. So I want to do average work. Let's do variance by project name, you know, something like that. How far are we off from what we said we were going to do by project? And we can see here, improvements and enhancements and new initiative implementations are really far off, whereas other projects, not so much. They're doing a lot better. From there, you can even tweak it, and I can go, you know what, I want this to be a column chart, and I can type in column. I didn't even type it in, right? And it still worked. So you can see it turned that into a column chart there. I can type in pie, and now it's a pie chart. And so you can get it the way that you want it. And then I can hit pin and pin this back to my dashboard. And from now on, I now have this new report that I just created in a few seconds, just by simply typing in, you know, a basic question here, right? If you want to get fancier, you absolutely can. There's a full editor built into this that lets me change font sizes and data colors and, you know, add the drill-ins and conditional formatting and all kinds of stuff that you might want to do. But if you're just looking for something simple, it can be as quick and as easy as that. So with that, hopefully you can see how this whole portfolio management, portfolio resource management, I should say, process can happen all the way from the very beginning, making your initial resource requests and plans, into project scheduling, into timesheets, and then we can report off of that throughout the entire thing, utilizing Project Online to help facilitate that process and give us better visibility into what's going on. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Jim for just a couple more slides, and then we'll let you guys go for the day. So there you go, Jim.
All right, terrific. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
All right, so let's summarize and wrap up. And thank you for that great demonstration, Matthew. Hopefully you guys can see the value of the fact that by being able to do more high-level capacity planning, we can get some good resource assumptions and requirements in early on. help us with the prioritization of those projects and align them with our ability to deliver resources, and then really be able to garner information at whatever level of detail makes the most sense through the reporting and visuals that happen with Power BI. So with that, just a little bit to reiterate about us. If we can help you in any way, Wickersoft does have a global footprint, and we're definitely all over North America. So if you want us to provide you more information or more detail, please let us know. We've got some good coverage and good representation, mostly where you are. And then from a next steps perspective, we're happy to provide a free initial assessment and roadmap of what it would take to get these capabilities put in place in your organization. No cost other than some time on your part to kind of feel this out and get some input on what it would take. To support that, we're also to help you on a free basis to set you up with a Project Online trial and really chaperone you through that trial with Wickersoft support in that, all on a pre-sales complimentary basis. Also, if there's some specific needs or use cases we didn't cover today, we're happy to schedule a personalized one-on-one demonstration for you and your organization and show you how that might work. In general, you can reach out to us at NA Sales, that's North America Sales, NA Sales at Wickersoft.com, or any one of us that were on the presentation today that you'd like to reach out to and direct, and you will get a copy of these slides after the presentation. Also, more information on our websites, us.wickersoft.com, Project Online specific focus at project-online.com, and also integration of this with other solutions. Oftentimes that happens in a resource and cost management realm, is that uswickersoft.com/Project Connect if you want some information on that. Also, we have upcoming webinars. If you go to uswickersoft.com/webinars, you can get a listing of those. And if we look at, let's see, here we go. Today we're doing the resource capacity and demand with Project Online. Next week we have save time with automated project status reporting. The week after we have agile and traditional project management, homogeneous or hybrid. The benefits and outcomes of moving to Project Online, etc. And on top of that, we have a whole library of on-demand webinars, which are recordings of one we've done in the past. So please feel free to avail yourself of that as you go on through. So with that, I would just like to say thank you for attending. We appreciate your time today. We know it's valuable. And please let us know and reach out to us if we can be of further assistance. Have a great day.